Hey there, Mr. Weaver here, and this is lesson 2 of our geometry unit, Transversals. After this lesson, you need to be able to solve for unknown angles from transversals of parallel lines, and you need to be able to solve for unknown angles using properties of triangles and supplementary angles. You'll know you're successful after this lesson if you can determine the value of one or more unknown angles using the properties of alternate interior, alternate exterior, vertical, and supplementary angles, as well as properties of triangles. Before we can begin solving for unknown angles, there are some key vocab that we need to understand what they mean and how the angles compare to each other. So first, we are going to be dealing with what are called transversals. A transversal is a line that crosses at least two parallel lines. So here in our picture, we see those two lines are parallel. The transversal is that line that crosses it. All of the angles that we're going to be dealing with are around where that transversal crosses those parallel lines. So all of the angles that we have letters for. The first two are pretty similar. We have alternate interior angles, and then the next one after this is alternate exterior angles. So an alternate interior angle are a pair of angles that are on the interior side of the parallel lines, but opposite sides of the transversal. So they're on the interior of the parallel lines, if you look at the picture, but opposite sides. So we have C and F. Those are inside and opposite. So C and F are alternate interior angles, and also D and E. The important thing to know about an alternate interior angles is they are equal. If C was 120 degrees, then you know that F is also 120 degrees. Or if D was 50 degrees, you also know that E is 50 degrees. They are equal. Another similar type of angles are alternate exterior angles. So these are similar to what we just saw, but they're on the exterior side of the parallel lines and opposite of the transversal. So exterior and opposite. Exterior meaning it's outside the parallel, and opposite sides of that transversal line. So A and G, or B and H. And just like the alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles are equal. So if you know A, say it was 60, then G would also be 60. Or if B was 100, then H would be 100. So alternate exterior angles are equal. So far, both sets of pairs that we've seen are equal. The next type of angle is called adjacent angles. So these angles have a common vertex and a common side. Adjacent angles are directly next to each other. Now, be careful because they do have to share a common side and a common angle. So let's say we had angle A, and I want to know which angles are adjacent. I can pick an angle right next to it. So angle B, so A and B are adjacent angles. Or I could have picked C. A and C are adjacent angles. In each place where the transversal intersects those parallel lines, there are a bunch of different adjacent angles. So in addition to A and B or A and C, I could have also had C and D, or B and D. Or using the other parallel line, I could have had E and F, E and H, F and G, or G and H. Again, they are around that place where the parallel lines intersect the transversal. Adjacent angles add up to 180 degrees. So if we take any angle here, so let's say we knew B was 50, because angle D is adjacent, it would have to be 130 because they would add up to 180 degrees. One caution here, you might be tempted to think like angle C and angle E are adjacent because they're directly next to each other. However, they don't share a common vertex, which is where the two lines intersect. So the vertex of C is right there, where the vertex of E is over here. They're not the same. They are not adjacent. Next, we have vertical angles. So these are angles that are directly opposite when two lines intersect. So we have the intersection of two lines there, of our transversal and one of our parallel lines. We're going to take the two that are opposite, A and D, or B and C. If we look at the other intersection with the other parallel line, we could have E and G and F and H. Those are also pairs of vertical angles. And just like we've seen with a couple other types of angles, vertical angles are equal. So if you know one of the angles, you know the other. Finally, supplementary angles are two or more angles that add up to 180 degrees. So in our transversals, our adjacent angles are going to be supplementary. So again, all those ones right next to each other, B and D, those two would add up to 180 degrees. Or G and H would add up to 180 degrees. Or A and C, or E and F, and so on. All those adjacent angles are going to be supplementary, which means they add to 180 degrees. Let's use some of the angles that we know and some of those properties of angles to fill in for our missing angles. So here we can see we have B, C, E, G, and H that we need to figure out. It doesn't matter which properties you use as long as you're following them correctly, and no matter which order you do them in, you should get the same answer. So I'm going to start with angles B and 70. I can see those are adjacent, and because they're adjacent, they're going to add up to 180 degrees. So angle B must be 110. That way 110 plus 70 is equal to 180. Now that I know that B is 110, I'm going to use vertical angles to go from B to C. If angle B is 110, then angle C is equal. It's also 110. Next, I'm going to use my alternate interior angles. So I can see that 70 and E are alternate interior angles, which means they are also equal. So E would be 70. If I use vertical angles or adjacent angles, H is 110. And finally, again, using vertical or adjacent, or even alternate exterior angles, I can see that G must be 70. No matter which property we use, we're going to get the same answers each time. If you notice too, on basic transversals like this, there is a pattern of the numbers. If you notice that pattern, when you come across basic transversal problems, you can also use that to help you out. So now it's your turn. Pause the video, see if you can figure out the missing angles for B, C, E, G, and H. Check your answers. You should have found that B is 85, C is 95, E is 85, G is 85, and H is 95. Let's look at another example, a little bit more complicated. Here we have a transversal of parallel lines, and part of it is drawn into a triangle. So I'm going to fill in any of the angles that I can, that I know of. So first, I notice that A and 133 and C and 133 both use vertical angles. Vertical angles are equal, so A and C must be equal to 133 degrees. Now that I know those, I can use alternate interior angles. If 47 is on one side of the transversal, then D on the opposite side must be also 47. I can go back and use vertical angles again. if I know D, then E must also be 47. I could have also used adjacent angles and found that was 47. Next, to find out G, once I know that E is 47, I can use the fact that a triangle adds up to 180 and figure out what G is. So 65 plus 47 plus G is 180. G must be equal to 68. And then last, I have that 3x plus 5 degrees is equal to 47. I know those two are equal because they are vertical angles. So now I just want to solve for x. So 3x plus 5 is equal to 47. So solving for x, if I just subtract 5 from both sides, then 3x must be equal to 42. And then x must be equal to 14. So for that one, I just used the fact that they were vertical angles. Vertical angles I know are equal, so I set them equal to each other so I could solve. Now it's your turn. Pause the video again and solve for A, C, D, E, G, and X. Check your answers. A should have been 107, C 107, D 73, E 73, G 52, and then solving for X, you should have found that X was equal to 30. In this lesson, we learned that a transversal is just a line that crosses two or more parallel lines. When that transversal cuts those parallel lines, it creates different types of angles that have specific properties. Alternate interior, alternate exterior, and vertical angles are all equal with their pair. So if you know one of them, you know the other. That's very helpful when filling in missing angles. Transversals also create many sets of adjacent angles, ones that are directly next to each other, and they share the same lines and vertex. The adjacent angles are supplementary, which means they add up to 180. So knowing which ones are equal and which ones are supplementary can help you to figure out any missing angles. Along with knowing that our triangles add up to 180, we can now solve all kinds of angle problems. So after this lesson, do you now know how to determine the value of one or more unknown angles using properties of alternate interior, alternate exterior, vertical, supplementary, adjacent, and properties of triangles? If you're not sure about those things, go back and rewatch parts of the lesson to deepen your understanding of angles. And that's the end of lesson 2 on transversals.